Hi there, everybody. Nice to be with you this morning. So this is going to be our Oulton College TaxCycle webinar where you're going to have a little bit of specialized training for how to become a little more comfortable with TaxCycle and how to prepare some tax returns. So you've been working on the paper tax returns. And your instructions state that when you've completed your paper tax returns, if you want to try to put them into TaxCycle, that would be a good exercise, a good project, good practice for you. You're going to be doing more learning activities with TaxCycle in January, but this is definitely going to give you a good head start. And I think I might have mentioned something about some bonus points in there as well. So I'm sure you'd all like to be comfortable enough in TaxCycle in order to print out those taxes for me in TaxCycle, wouldn't you? Okay, so TaxCycle, we've looked at it a little bit before I left, and I think you should all know where it is on your desktop. So if you could right now, just take a little look on your desktop and look for the TaxCycle icon. Now I keep mine down here on my bar. The TaxCycle that I'm using today is the one that I have for my personal business. So you might find that it looks a little bit different, or maybe it has a few things that yours doesn't have, but we'll be able to definitely accomplish the same thing. So certainly don't worry about that. Okay, so if you want to click your TaxCycle, and you should end up with a window that looks something like this. And this window here, I'm on the start portion. So there's start, and then there's a client manager. That client manager is where all my different clients would be listed. And then this is open and carry forward, or ways to open or carry forward clients from previous years. And then we go into options here. The section you've already been familiar with is this options section. This is where we put in our name and our e-file number and any other settings that we want specific for us. So we've been through those together, and that should be all set up. Hopefully, if you were absent that day, hopefully somebody's able to kind of help you out a little bit through that. But that should all be set up for as far as your options are concerned. Okay, so just a little bit about this TaxCycle screen and some of the things that you see. This first box here, T1, it says 2012 to 2016. T1 is where we're going to be mostly focusing today. We're going to be going back to it once we've looked at the other things on the screen. T1 is a general tax return. It's the ones you've been working with on your paper returns that you've been preparing. So a T1 is another word for a personal tax return. The next one is a T2. So you see that on mine on T2. I don't know if yours has T2 or not. I have a feeling it might not. If it does have it and you want to take a look at it, you're more than welcome to do so. A T2 is a corporate tax return, so it's a tax return that a corporation would file. The next one here you'll see is the T3. And a T3 is something, it's a tax return for a trust. So for me, the most common time I ever would use that is if a taxpayer dies and they've earned money after their death. Well, that money can't go on their final tax return. It has to go on a separate trust return. So that's what that would be for. The next one here, T4, T4A. So when you're an employer, so thinking back maybe to our payroll class and what we've been learning there, and you have some clients to which you've had to issue T4s, at the end of the year, you have to prepare a T4 return that summarizes for CRA all the T4s you've issued and all the deductions and who you took off how much for everybody. So you'll see that there. And then T5 would be similar to the T4, but instead of T4 employment income, T5 is where you would see things like dividends and interest. So we'll just click on this T4 one just for the fun of it. You can kind of take a peek and see. I'm just going to click on it here. So I've clicked on the T4 just to show you for a quick minute here what you're kind of looking at for the T4 return. And you'll see here, this is where I'd put, like, I'm just saying, if you're preparing a T4 return, it means you're an employer and say you've had a few employees and you've paid them things and now it's time for you to prepare their T4. So here I would put the basic information about my company, my payroll account number, remember that's 9 digits, and then it would be RP, it's probably 0001, right? And then the name of the company. So I'm just going to go here to the prepare tab to show you what else I would kind of enter in. So that's where I put my basic information for my company. And then let's just say I was going to prepare a new T4. So there's like 3 different places I could have clicked that. I could click T4, could click T4 up here on the gray dark gray bar, on the light gray bar, or here on the left under prepare. I could say create a new T4. So then here's some of the information that I would have to put on somebody's T4. This is pretty much a lot of the same information that you've been learning to keep track of on those Excel spreadsheets for the payroll ledgers in payroll class. So you need the person's social insurance number, their name, their address, and then down here you would specify what taxation year, what province. If they were CPP or EI exempt, you would be clicking that into one of those buttons over here on the right. And down here, the few more items you would do would be entering in the actual slips of the money that they earned and the CPP and EI contributions that they've contributed. So all the items that you would just be kind of peeling those right off of your payroll ledger, like we kind of practice preparing. So you see here the spot for how much union dues they contributed, how much charitable donations they've contributed, and so on. Pension adjustment, we all know now what that is, don't we? It's about their RSPs and how much they've contributed to their RPPs. So once you've entered all this information at the top, then if you just scroll down here, then you kind of see what that T4 would look like. Here, this T4 is looking like a little bit more of a familiar form, isn't it? Where you'd have the employer's name populate here. All of this at the bottom, this form would automatically populate based on what you put at the top of the form. And automatically the social insurance number, any exemptions, and all the income would automatically just auto-populate. And then from there, you would just enter in all your employees, and then you would be able to have a summary page, and you could print those or file them electronically to the government and email them to your employees. And of course, if you had all of this information, raw data, in either in Excel or in some sort of other payroll management software, you likely could import that data into this TaxCycle software so that you didn't have to type it all in manually, especially if, imagine you had hundreds and hundreds of employees. That would be a very tedious thing. So I know when I had the company where I was issuing, 400 or 500 different T4As, those are people with self-employed commissions, I would have the data in another format, and I would just import it into TaxCycle so that I didn't have to print it all out myself. So it's always a bit of gaps here and there, but overall it's a much, much easier process. Okay, so that was just to show you what the T4 module looks like. We're not going to be looking at that too much, but we are going to look at this T4 module a little bit in more detail at the end of our payroll course. So when we learn about T4s in our payroll course, just a little bit down the road, we will practice preparing some T4s in this exact module. So we won't be learning it today, but you will be learning it within the next month or so of how you use it in a little bit more detail. Perhaps we'll prepare T4s and T4 summaries for the ledgers that we prepared for our Chapter 8 work in payroll ledgers. Okay, so I'm going to close this file now. In order to close a file, I have up here a bunch of different icons. It's possible you don't have as many icons across the top of your blue bar as I do. But this one here, it's a little file folder and it's got a backwards arrow. If I hover over it, it says close. If you don't have that close icon, what you need to do is go down to the very end of all the icons, and there's a little down arrow here. If you click on that, all of a sudden a bunch of icons show up. And what this is this is all the icons that you can choose to have on your top bar. So mine are already customized to kind of be the icons that I like to have there the most. So as you see, if you just go down right here to close, I already have a check mark next to it. So I've got a check mark there. If you don't have a check mark, make a check mark there, and then that way it'll automatically show up on the top of your bar as well. Okay, and if ever there's other ways that you want to kind of order something, you can kind of customize that bar based on some of these options. So all you have to do is just kind of go and look and just put a little check mark there next to the icons that you'd like to see at the top of your bar. Okay, so we should all have the close icon at the top of our menu bar here, top of our toolbar. So let's click on close. And if I would have entered a single thing, it would have asked me, do you want to save this? But because I hadn't even entered a single keystroke on that return, there was nothing to save. So it just closed it for me. So right now I'm over here in the T4s. I'm going to go back into this blue T1 box. That's where we're going to focus the rest of our class today. I'm going to talk with you now for a little while longer about a bit of formatting and the way the tax cycle windows look and the flow of the tax returns. And then we're going to have a second video where you're going to have a chance to prepare 2 tax returns step by step with me. So you each have 2 little packages there, 2 little tax returns that we're going to prepare together. So this video that we're looking at together right now is going to be more just high level as far as getting used to the program, and then our second video will kind of be able to jump right into it and start preparing those returns. If I'm going too fast, either in this webinar or in the next one, I don't know how it looks from your seats, whether you can see this mouse moving or not. Just please let me know, and you can let me know by putting your hand up for the instructor. The instructor can pause. There should be enough extra time so that if needed, you need to from time to time. That's perfectly okay. So just gonna push this down for a second here. Okay. So we should all be back in the T1 box. So I've showed you here the start. Client Manager is where I would click if I wanted to look at all my clients. Options we've already dealt with a fair bit together to kind of get that ready for you. Down here is kind of where I can get my news. So TaxCycle will post little updates. Sometimes if there's something kind of a little bit more major that happened in the news world as far as tax changes, I can just click on one of the news items there and kind of take a little read. There's a article posted on Friday, November 18th about some TaxCycle webinars. So they have, I could click on that right now, and I would see that they're just telling us about some webinars that they are posting about 30-minute webinars. So kind of just like exactly what I'm doing about getting started with TaxCycle. 10 a.m. Mountain Time. We should see if any of those match up with your classes here, shouldn't we? 10 a.m. Mountain Time. That's going to be later in the day, I think, unfortunately. But TaxCycle has tons of great already posted webinars, and they're very good, and they have their own. TaxCycle has a YouTube channel, so if you want to take a look at it, that would be a perfectly grand idea to do so. That said, the reason I did this one is because I just couldn't find a webinar that was exactly showing you the things I wanted you to see and learn, because our purpose is a little bit more narrow. We're not dealing with returning clients like most users would be, and we're going to be, using it in a bit more of a streamlined fashion, because the tax clinic doesn't really allow for printing and a few other little things. So I'm able to kind of just get right to the information we want to learn by playing these for myself. But if you want to register for any of those webinars, or if you want to look on their YouTube channel and look at any other videos that you think might be interesting, I think Cameron Peters, I believe, is the owner's name, and he does most of the webinars, and he knows the software inside out. So he's really comfortable when he's talking about it, and just he's very knowledgeable. So it's very enjoyable to listen to that, because you'll definitely learn. And if taxes are something that you're starting to think that maybe you might be interested in the future, then if as you start to see this software and start to be more comfortable with it, you might find that if this is a software you'd like to work with, then his webinars are going to be good for you to listen to. Obviously, it's learn from the creator of a software when you're getting to know a software. But I personally find this software to be the most new and fresh, easy to use, user friendly, and modern, and very, very up to date with I would say taxes right now are changing so quickly as far as implementing new technologies. Even Canada Revenue is finally making some big strides, and TaxCycle is always on the cutting edge of that. So I really enjoy using them. All right, let's click on this T1. So we should all be clicked under T1, and then there's like a little white kind of triangle, and then it says 2016 personal tax returns. Now for our purposes, we are always going to push this green plus button that says new 2016 T1 TP1 tax return. Now, if I am working in my own office, I only push this new one when I have a brand new client come in the door. Otherwise, I click in my open or my carry forward, because I want to make sure I open a client that I've already had before. I want to make sure that their address is already there and any carry forward amounts is already there. So those would be what I would use for an existing client. But for our purposes, both for our learning taxes that we're going to be doing, and for people that come in for the tax clinic in the spring, in both cases, they're going to be brand new clients. They're not going to have any information in our files. And even if they came to our tax clinic last year, the tax clinic program does not allow us to keep any information on them whatsoever. So we don't know their name, we don't know their social insurance number, nothing. We're starting from scratch for every single person that comes into the clinic. So I realized that the paper tax files you've been working on for that CRA learning course have been 2015 tax returns. So when you get to the part of your project where you're ready to try to input those tax returns into TaxCycle, totally up to you. If you want to do them in 2015 for consistency, that's absolutely fine. If you want to do them in 2016, because that's the one I'm using, that's fine too. I'm going to teach in 2016 because that's the one we need to get used to for our tax clinic coming up. So that, I think, is the most important part of our learning, is making sure we're kind of consistent there. But when you're inputting your paper files, if you want to use 2015, that's fine. So instead, if you did choose to use 2015 instead of 2016, instead of pushing this green plus button that says new 2016, you would go over here where it says 2015, and you would push this green plus over here where it says new 2015. But I wouldn't penalize either way. Either 2016 or 2015 return would be absolutely fine there. So for right now, let's push new 2016 return, just like that. And I'm going to maximize the screen. And okay. So this is what our window looks like when we're starting a tax, if you've maximized it like me. This possible that I have some things that are customized that perhaps you don't have customized. But overall, it should look something a little bit like this. So all these items are in yellow, are fields that TaxCycle expects you to fill out, and they're expecting you to do that. So for example, social insurance number, birth date, name, all these things are things we're going to fill out. And you'll see here up top, we're on the info page. So you see we're on info. And then if I wanted to flip over to say to input her T4, I would just click on T4. Okay, if I want to go back to info, I can push info. If I want to go back to T4, I can go back to T4. So you can see I can navigate this way. There's a lot of ways to navigate in this program. So this dark gray bar right above the light gray bar has a bunch of forms that I might have picked that are kind of my favorites. So the light gray bar kind of indicates what's kind of open at the time. The dark gray bar kind of just shows what my favorite forms are. So what my favorite form that I use for every single tax, and it's the summary page that you're going to use to print out after you've inputted those paper tax files, is the T1 summary form that I'm pointing at here. Right here, T1 summary. Yours, it might not be at the top because it might be that I've set my program up to always have it up there and you might not have it up there. But T1 summary is right here. And it's okay if you don't click on that right now. So don't worry about pausing it to find the form at this point or anything. But this is just the form that I'm going to have you all learn a little bit later in your webinars here. But you'll see here it has kind of a catch-all, so you get to see quickly all the information. And then as this information down lower, all the income and the credits, as the tax gets filled out, all that information is there, so you have a bit of a snapshot view of exactly what the story is for that person. And you can kind of quickly, when I'm going over a tax with a client, I have this usually printed on the front so that instead of flipping through a bunch of different pages with a client, I can kind of just go through this one page with them and kind of tell them everything that they need to know. Okay, so let's say I've opened this T1 summary, but I don't actually want it open right now or at this point. I can just push this X and it's closed, and I just went back to my info box. Whatever slips I have open for a tax will show up on this gray bar. Once I've entered something on a slip, just my own personal habit, once I've entered something on a slip, I don't usually close that slip anymore. So I wouldn't X a slip that I had information on, just to kind of keep track of all the different slips that I've got going, and kind of so that I can more easily toggle back and forth between them. Okay, so the tax cycle divides the process of preparing tax returns into 4 sections. Some of these sections you won't really be using at all. Some of them you'll use a little bit, and we'll see. So the work is going to be done in the prepare module. So you see on the left there's 4 modules: prepare, review, transmit, and print. So prepare is mostly what you're learning to do is prepare tax returns, correct? So that's what we're going to be practicing doing together shortly. And right now we're on the info page where we kind of can start with that beginning information. And as you can see, there are a lot of forms to deal with. So they're even not all expanded, but if it's all expanded, it comes out to 163 forms. So it's important to know which forms you need to use. In your paper return project that you're working on, it's pretty clear for each return which forms and which schedules that you're going to need. And I'll try to be equally clear so that when you see 163 forms, you might think, oh, I might miss something. But we'll make sure that you know which forms to use for these 2 taxes. And then after that, you'll get used to knowing what forms to use by using the tools in TaxCycle in order to kind of figure that out. Okay, so one little thing that you can know to kind of start out, all these forms, let's say I need to find a specific form and I know what the form is called, but I don't know how to find it and I don't want to go through 163 forms, right? Okay, so let's say I know all about the tuition form, but I don't know where to put it. Okay, so instead of going through all these forms and going, where's tuition, where's tuition, where's tuition? Okay, I can push the F4 button. Does everybody have an F4 button hopefully on their keyboard? And if I push the F4 button, this little bar comes up. And I'm just going to write in here, it just starts to autofill, but I'm just going to start to write the word tuition. I haven't even finished writing the word tuition yet, and it knows that I want to either find the S11 form or enter a tuition slip. So let's go, yeah, I've got a tuition slip. This is it. I can just click on that tuition slip and it opened. Okay, so let's just pretend here I look at this tuition slip. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. There's a place to put in the issuer and the number of months I was in school. And okay, this is great. Oh, actually, she didn't have a tuition slip. Okay, so let's say now I don't need this tuition slip after all. I can just push this X and I'm just going to go back to my info page. Okay. If I did enter something in the those tuition boxes, then I would have just left that there, but I still would have flipped back to whatever other form or slip or page I needed to go back to. So I'm going back to that personal information page for now, just to kind of have a home, if you will. Um, so that's just one thing you might like to write down as far as finding forms is push the F4 button and then just start typing what you're looking for, and it can be very intuitive as far as helping you find it. So okay, so these 163 forms, there is a bit of a rhyme or reason. So if I'm just going to condense them so that you can kind of see, they're the forms. If you are looking for, if you kind of know what you're looking for, there's the identification, which is what we're in right now. And then there's all the different slips like T4s, T5s, T4As, things like that. And then there's worksheets, there's income statements. That's for people that have rentals or have a business. There's different types of deductions, like perhaps moving expenses, let's say, or maybe childcare expenses, right? We've learned about those. And then there's a spot for other types of worksheets, and there's going to be a spot for other types of taxes that I don't think you'll be dealing with too much in your course. And then there's going to be a spot for the federal schedules, like the Schedule 1, like you've been learning to fill in your paper files, and then the provincial tax forms as well. Then there's this tab called Summaries. So if you were looking for that T1 summary, you would find it here under Summaries. So you wouldn't have to go through 163 forms to find T1 summary. You would go to Summaries, and there's still a lot of summaries. There's probably about 15 here, but the second last one here is T1 summary, and that's the one that I had open a little earlier. He has various summaries that different people liked. He kind of includes quite a few different summaries because different people like different summaries, and that way you can kind of pick the one you like the best. I like this T1 summary, but once in a while, instead, if I need the snapshot of a family, instead, let's say I have a couple and I kind of need to show them their situation as a couple, or I need to kind of play around with how things are going to work for both of them together, I'll click on this family one. And if there was two people, there would be two columns. There would be a column for person A and then a second column for person B. And then I can kind of look and see and compare, who's got paying the most tax and how, if there's anything I could kind of move around from here to there. So that's why I like kind of seeing that family summary as well. I don't think we're going to be doing this for the tax clinic, but another thing I see here that I just have to mention is this AFR under summaries, autofill my return. And that's something I just started doing last year. And it's pretty neat. But if you have, we won't be doing this for the tax clinic. If you have somebody that has signed saying that you are allowed to represent them, so I have clients that say that I'm allowed access to their tax account and everything, I'm able to go online, go onto the Canada Revenue portal where the represent a client or my business account is, and it will pull all the information that they have on the tax, and it will match the information that I have. And what that does is it helps verify that I didn't make any typos or mistakes, and that my RSP deduction limit matches their RSP deduction limit, and that my numbers for the T4s match the numbers they have for the T4s. It's really a nice system. I'm enjoying that. Something else that's new this year, and I don't know if we'll be doing any of it, is people will have the ability to authorize EFT payment directly for their tax payment. So I don't know if we'll get into doing that at the clinic or not, but it is new, where you can have the person enter their banking information and authorize the amount that the CRA can take out to pay their taxes. So I think that's going to become actually probably pretty popular, because often people find it a little bit overwhelming to pay the taxes if they're not into internet banking, because then they have to wait for the remittance stub to come in, and then they have to take that to the bank with a check. And nowadays people are getting away from that type of banking and they find it annoying. So I think that's going to become pretty popular. The last little tab here, oh, let me just close the slips one here. The last tab here is correspondence, and this correspondence is pretty neat. So what you have is a bunch of templates. So my template has Johnson Accounting and everything because this is my my personal tax cycle folder. Yours is not going to say Johnson Accounting at the top, obviously. But what it does is it, once I have the tax done, it automatically fills in kind of all the, it has a bunch of different fields that it'll kind of automatically fill in, and it turns it into like a lovely letter for the client so that I can kind of put the letter at the top of their tax and say, and I can kind of practically just read them this letter or kind of summarize it, and they have their letter, they have their tax return in layman's terms at the top of their tax, or it's in a letter format. Because some people look at those tax forms and they don't, they just, it looks just like a big blur to them. But if they have a letter, and sometimes I'll highlight anything information, any important information right on the letter, like your T1 return shows, let's say it showed a balance due of $7,500, I might highlight that to make sure that they're truly aware of how their tax ended up. So I'm able to do my invoices from here, whatever their balance is owing, and I'm able to do basically I do a pre-season letter as well, where I send my clients a letter usually around January, just kind of going over any changes I've had in my office over the year, and any other information that they might like to know as well. I give them the RSP deadline so that they know when they should call me for scenarios and things like that. Okay, so that is the prepare section. The next section down, you will learn to use it a little bit today, and more so over the next month when we get a little further into preparing taxes. But I'm just going to go back to info. Okay, so see, these are all the forms I've opened. So this AFR one, I don't need that to be open. I'm just going to close it. And this invoice one, I'm just going to close it just to take away some of the clutter off my bar so I can quickly see kind of what might be important. I'm going to take out this family letter and this client letter and this pre-season letter. And I'll even, now I'm going to go back to my info. So that's the one with the red little do not enter sign on it. And I'm back to my home page, okay? And I've clicked on my left, I've clicked on the review. The reason it has this do not enter sign here, and it means that basically do not enter sign means this tax will not get filed the way it is. You need to do something in order to make sure that this tax is fileable, because unless I have certain information, it's not going to work. So left, you see on the review, there's quite a few things that are showing up. Some of them are those red do not enter signs, and that means if I don't have that information, I can't file this tax. So there's lots of missing information, obviously, on this tax because I haven't started it yet. But once I do, those red bars will start to disappear, and ideally, by the time you're done, you should get rid of all these flags or warnings. Now, you might get used to just sort of signing off on warnings. When we do the tax clinic, this review area will be something that the instructors that are helping monitor the class will probably use quite heavily, because what we can do is, say you have we're at the tax clinic and I've brought you over a tax return and you've put in all the slips, you've put in the basic information, and then you've entered the slips. So you've entered everything that you know to enter, and you've looked at the T1 summary and everything seems to kind of match. At that point, you would raise your hand and one of the instructors would come over and kind of take a look at what you've done so far. And if you were done, then what we would do is we would look at the slips and we would do the same thing. We would make sure you put the T4s in with the proper T4s, that you didn't put a T4 in with a T4A or a T5 with a T4 or something like that. Make sure all your slips were entered properly. And then once we've kind of looked at all your slips and kind of looked for any little tiny errors, we would go to this review section. This review is very intuitive. It really picks up on even little tiny mistakes that might not even be a mistake, but they're thinking maybe something's wrong here. Could you double check it? So sometimes there's a big, the red and white bar. That's like a, you need to fill this in. But there's other things that are just like question marks, where it's sometimes a little bit more optional, but they still want you to acknowledge that you've read it and that you know about it. So the instructor can come and kind of look through these items and see if there's anything else that needs to kind of be dealt with before the tax gets filed. And if the student has already signed off on some of these warnings, we're able to go and look at all messages, including messages that had been previously signed off. So that way we really make sure we don't miss any errors, even by accident. So there's a way for the instructor to really take a good look before any tax gets filed. So this review section is something that you use kind of after you're done preparing to kind of help catch any fields that you probably should have filled in, or any maybe mistakes that might have been made. So what might happen is once you've filled in a certain form, it might say, well, if you filled that form in, you should have filled in such and such a form. For example, if I filled in a form for childcare expenses, but I never filled in the form to list my child with a date of birth, it's going to flag and say, okay, you tried to claim childcare expenses, but I don't have anywhere here about you having children or what their ages are. So you need to fill that form out. So things like that, they'll kind of catch. The next two items, so there's prepare, which is we've looked at, and there's a review that we've looked at. The next two items, I kind of would reverse them for me, and he has them in this order. I'm not sure why, and maybe you can change the order. I'm not sure. I don't know if you can or not. Anyway, my next step for me would be print or PDF, and that's because I wouldn't file or transmit a tax until I've printed it either by paper or by PDF to my client, because my client needs to sign their confirmation authorization form before I'm allowed to file their tax anyway. So I'm going to print it all out for them and give it to them and go over it with them. And then I'm going to wait until I have that T183 in my physical possession signed before I file any tax. More and more, I'm getting more and more clients that don't live in Moncton, and I'm doing more and more purely paperless taxes. Now, that's not going to happen too much for us in the tax clinic, unfortunately, but it is a really nice change. So what's happening now is I'll have a client just email me their forms. I email them back their return. They email me back the authorization. I file the tax. I can email them back the confirmation if they like. They can send me an e-transfer to pay me. Not a single piece of paper has to be printed for that entire thing. I do still keep paper files, so I might still keep a note in my paper file just on an existing piece of paper in there that that the year was done, and maybe with the confirmation number, and then I have my ledger in Excel to keep track of the payments. But the entire thing can now be done without printing a single page. I'd say I'm still printing for about I probably at about 75 to 80% of people I'm still printing for. But I mean, it used to be 99%, and it's going down every year, that more and more people are going paperless, because not everybody else wants all that paper either. And it's lovely for us because it means less paper to print, and it's tedious to deal with all that paper. So it's really enjoyable to just, instead of print to paper, you print to PDF. So this area where you print, we're going to learn that more next month. When we practice the 2 tax returns in the next webinar, I'll teach you how to print the tax summary page, because that's the only page I'm requesting for you to print for the paper CRA tax files that you're working on, is just the T1 summary page. So I will show you a little later how to just print that one page. We don't actually get into printing the taxes for in the tax clinic. So I will show you, next month a little bit about these print modules, but you're not going to really be using them at the clinic, because the Canada Revenue Agency just has specific forms. We fill out paper and pen, and it's we stick to that. So they don't get these printouts like my regular clients would be. That said, you can customize your print sets. You can customize which forms you always like your client to get. You can customize those letters. So it makes it so that at the end, instead of having my old program, I had to go and think of all the different forms I would want to include on their tax. Whereas this program, it goes, okay, these are the forms you used, and you've told me that if you use such and such a forms, you always want those ones printed, so that'll be included in the client copy. So I'm able to make all those decisions in January before I even see a client. And I'm familiar with the form, so I'm able to kind of make those calls. So it only includes the forms that were used that I've told it I want to include. And I can have a client copy, a regular copy, an office copy. Generally, I just use the one because I'm not printing copies for my office anymore. And you're not printing one for e-file anymore. Obviously, that's just being electronically filed. So if I have to keep some paper copy for some reason in my office, I usually just duplicate the office copy, but I try not to print for my office anymore. If I am printing to PDF, then in addition to emailing it to the client, I also save it in my records as well, under my client, under a folder, with my client tax returns. But I don't have to worry for my usage too much about the 3 different versions anymore, because we're able to get away from so much printing now. So that's the print. So now we're just on to the last module, which is the transmit. We won't be doing any transmitting till the spring, so we don't need to worry about that one too much today. But it just kind of shows you quickly that at this point, it would not let me e-file this T1 return because there's a bunch of stuff missing here because we haven't even started this T1 return. But that would be kind of the 4th and final step for me of a tax return, would be filing that tax at the very end. Okay, so I'm just going to click back up here to prepare, sorry. And we're back at the info page. And we see all the different slips that we have. So I think, let me just look at my time here. I think this might be, how many minutes am I in here? Okay. I'm pretty sure this will be a good spot for us to pause, and you can take a break and I'll take a break. And in the next webinar, what we'll do is have your 2 packets ready. There should be 2 different little tax returns that you're going to practice preparing. We're going to do those together step by step. And that way you'll have two returns kind of prepared, and one is a single person, one is a married couple, both of them have a child, so you'll kind of have a little bit of practice with doing all that in the software. And then that way, when it comes time for you to enter in those CRA paper returns that you've prepared, when it comes time to put those into TaxCycle, that shouldn't be an overwhelming thing. You should feel like you can do that. You are going to have access, I expect, to these files afterwards. So whatever we go through, you can then look back, listen again, and watch this again. And if you don't like the way I did it, go on to the TaxCycle YouTube channel and listen to some of their webinars. Maybe I'm sure they're the experts, so they'll do a better job than I did. But I'll go through them step by step so that you're able to kind of mimic that same activity, because these are the same basic type of taxes as you have in the CRA learning files that I left for you. So you'll have access to these. If you're listening to them in class, please bring headphones with you. I don't want to have anybody distracted or finding it hard to focus because someone else needs to re-listen to these videos. I'm sure some of you only want to listen to this once. So please bring headphones if you think you might need to re-listen to these videos in order to complete the TaxCycle inputting for your CRA learning activities. All right, and I'm going to sign out here.